me loud and clear?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you, Samir. How are you?
Awesome. Lovely. All right. Very good. Thank you very much. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad.
Awesome. Right. So let's just do a formal introduction because I know this is live and I think we've got about 20 people watching right now, but I'm hoping to put this recording as an IGTV video and then also on Facebook. So people who aren't able to join right now will be able to watch us later on, and obviously the analysis and the discussions that we do on the LPL. So to start off, I'm just going to make a quick introduction about myself. Those of you who might not know me, my name is Samir. I'm a former news presenter. And I also did some radio commentaries for SLBC, especially for cricket, obviously. It's a game we love. Right now, I'm doing a bit of freelance commentating and presenting for thepapare.com, Sri Lanka's #1 and best sports website and network right now. And yeah, pretty much a cricket enthusiast and a lover just like the rest of you and an ordinary Sri Lankan. And joining me today for this awesome discussion on the Lanka Premier League is an award-winning author, Andrew Fidel Fernando. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this. He is easily the best cricket writer in the world. And this is not from me. I'm sure anyone in the cricket fraternity will agree with me. So Andrew writes for Cricinfo. And I'll tell you, Andrew, this, that every time Sri Lanka plays a match, the next day I open the Cricinfo tab on my laptop and every half an hour I'm just refreshing to see when an article from you will come up. So that's how much of a fan I am. So this is really a proud moment for me. Hope your Saturday is going well so far. Everything good?
Yeah, I just woke up, but yeah, it's going fantastic. So nice to be here talking to you.
Nice, nice. Okay, before we actually get to the LPL itself, I know we've been starved of cricket, especially Sri Lankan cricket. There has been a domestic tournament and that went on and concluded, I think, about a month ago. But a lot of us cricket fans have had no choice but to follow and, watch the IPL. Have you been watching the IPL? Have you been following what's going on there?
Yeah, I have been. I've been, I guess, like a little bit surprised. It's been a good tournament. I think the IPL's had a few close matches, a few surprising results, and then it's nice to have kind of new teams dominating. Well, Delhi Capitals being so good, RCB for a change being in the mix for being in one of those final positions. And Isrudana doing a little bit for RCB as well, and being kind of consistently picked. That's been nice to see also.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, Isrudana is the only one Sri Lankan who seems to be representing all of us. Just excuse me, I think there's something wrong with my aircon. I'm just going to switch that off. So yeah, sorry about that. It's good to see Isrudana also doing well for RCB, although the last few matches hasn't been the greatest for him. Although RCB as a whole seem to be doing quite well. And I think Naufal has a question about why only one Sri Lankan at IPL. Andrew, I think it's got to do with, I think initially over the first few years, it was got to do with the tour scheduling, wasn't it? Every time there was an IPL, Sri Lanka had commitments, I think in England or something like that. And then obviously the whole political issue with Tamil Nadu and Sri Lankan players not being able to go to Chennai. You think those are the only reasons, or is it also lack of exposure and Sri Lankan team overall not doing so well in T20?
No, I think it's, I mean, there was that one year, I think it was 2014, when Sri Lanka won the World T20. And then a lot of Sri Lankan players played in the IPL and largely didn't do very well. I think that was the year when Kumar Sangakkara and Mahela Jayawardene, I think, were captain of teams. I think Kumar was with, might have been with the Hyderabad team, and Mahela was with Kochi Tuskers. And there were, quite a few Sri Lankan players who just, didn't do well in the IPL despite, being World T20 champions. And then ever since then, I'm not saying it was the fault of those players, but ever since then, there's kind of been a decline in demand for Sri Lankan players in the IPL, partly because Sri Lanka doesn't have a high quality T20 tournament for in which younger and kind of less known T20 players can showcase their talents and really catch the eye of IPL scouts and IPL teams and IPL owners. There's a local tournament for a young player to come in and maybe even for someone like a Dilshan Munawira, say, who did well in that one SLPL and then kind of forged half a career out of it by going around the world and playing a few T20 tournaments. He did that because there was one SLPL in 2012 once upon a time. Sri Lanka had a consistent T20 tournament, high profile, high quality franchise tournament over the last few years. I think a lot more players who aren't necessarily of international quality or who aren't necessarily going to, make it internationally as long kind of with like long stable careers, but who are still can be useful to these franchise teams in T20s. We would have seen a lot more of those kinds of players, be picked up by IPL teams. Maybe they wouldn't have been the big value kind of big money players that that draw crowds or anything, but they could still have been useful players for many, many teams. But unfortunately, we didn't see that. We didn't get a franchise tournament. And even now, I think they're still struggling to get one off the ground.
Right. And I think that's one of the reasons you mentioned the lack of having a proper T20 tournament or like a league. That's one of the reasons, I guess, a lot of these fringe English players and Australian players get selected because they are noticed in the Big Bash League and the Royal London T20 tournament that England has. So I think it makes sense when you say that there's a lack of a good T20 tournament, but that's what we're here to discuss. And finally, I think Sri Lanka Cricket seems to have put together something called the Lanka Premier League. And I think there's a lot of excitement among the cricket fans because this seems like something that might just be, continuous, more importantly, because you mentioned we had the SLPL, not the most successful tournament. It was a one-off. There were issues surrounding it. But now I think this time Sri Lanka Cricket is a bit more confident. They seem a bit more organized with this. They've obviously given the whole thing to be organized by IPG, which is a Dubai-based group. How confident are you that this Lanka Premier League will really kick off and then go on to become a successful tournament?
I'm still not convinced that it's definitely going to happen.
Right. Okay.
Because of all the challenges that come with the pandemic here, I think that quarantine is going to be something that they're going to have to convince the players of. Now, SLC says that everyone who's signed on so far
has agreed
to 14 quarantine, but I'm not sure that players coming from the IPL bubble, a few of them will be coming straight from the IPL, will want to go straight into a 14-day quarantine. I think there might be a little bit of pushback there, but I guess I've also heard that SLC is trying as much as they can to tell the health authorities to relax the quarantine rules, especially for players who are coming from the IPL bubble straight into an LPL bubble. Just to have a 7-day quarantine or a shorter quarantine for those kinds of players. So I think it's still going to be a challenge to get it off the ground. I mean, we still haven't had, for example, a franchise owner's announcement, right? We know that Galle Gladiators is owned by the same owners as Quetta Gladiators, but the rest of the owners haven't been announced. I mean, this is, I guess, 3 or 4 weeks until the tournament's set to start. So just about 4 weeks until the tournament's set to start. So there's a lot to be done between now and November 21st for this tournament to get off the ground. All I hope is that in a pandemic year in which we haven't seen any cricket, I think I haven't covered cricket since March, and I don't think since 10 years ago I've gone this long a stretch without being at a cricket match, and I think all of us are missing it. So hopefully it does get off the ground. There is a little bit of news that I've heard, not great news for the LPL because the South Africa and England have just announced a one-day tournament.
Yes.
In the period that the LPL was meant to be paid, which means that players like David Miller and David Malan not be
Faf du Plessis.
LPL. Du Plessis, apparently, I spoke to an SLC official yesterday. Apparently, Du Plessis is okay. I haven't confirmed that, but according to this official, Du Plessis will still come. But Malan and David Miller may not be part of it, but we'll see. A few of the SLC teams, LPL teams, are still trying to persuade foreign players to kind of to make the trip over, but they are quickly running out of time because you've got the 14-day quarantine and you want these squads to have a little bit of training time before the tournament to kind of make it a high quality and worthwhile event.
Yeah, I want to get to that about foreign players backing out at the last moment, right? We'll get to that towards the end once we've discussed the teams. Right, sorry about that. So before that, building up to the tournament itself, Sri Lanka cricket, kept releasing details in a very shady manner, didn't they? There was a news going around about some big names to begin with. and then some of those names just disappeared. Even you mentioned about the team owners still being unknown. Nobody knows who some of the team owners are. So the fact that the details have been so shady and Sri Lanka cricket has been a bit slow in terms of releasing them, you think it's a very cautious approach they're taking because of what happened with SLPL, and they don't want to, I don't know, I can't seem to find the right word, but they don't want to emphasize the LPL, saying, okay, this is it, it's going to happen. They're just being very cautious. Do you think that's the reason?
Yeah, I think there is a sense of not wanting to promise too much. I think you're right. This tournament has had so many false starts. They've announced it, several years, and it hasn't happened. So I think that is part of it. The other part is they're just like everything's kind of flying together very ad hoc and at the last moment. And I think all of that is compounded by the fact that the pandemic's going on. So no, it's not business as usual for anybody at the moment. And so I think all of those things have made it kind of a chaotic kind of start and chaotic kind of organizing process. And if you watch the LPL draft earlier this week, I think Monday, it's very obvious that the owners and the coaches, the people picking the players, were largely unaware of kind of like the intricacies of the draft rules. It's like and as far as it was quite obvious that they had just come up with a lot of the draft rules that morning before the draft happened that evening. So there's all of these things are kind of they'll play
iffy, if that's the right word.
Yeah, they haven't been able to promote the tournament with any confidence. There's been not a lot of marketing, and there's been I heard whispers of kind of like Bollywood links owners and all this kind of stuff, but there has been no official announcements. So it's a tournament that's been organized by rumor almost at the moment.
Right. You brought up the players draft, and that's the thing that I wanted to get into. I watched most of it on Monday when it happened, and I'm sure you did too. I mean, even that, initially they said, okay, it's going to be live and everyone can watch it. And then later on they said, no, it's going to be a private thing. And then in the middle of it, there was a YouTube link for people to watch it. So again, a bit shady in the way it was done. And you mentioned how it was total chaos sometimes between the owners and Sri Lanka Cricket. They didn't know the rules, and Sri Lanka Cricket had to go back and forth. They kept taking 2-minute breaks of trying to figure out what the answers that the owners had. In terms of the player picking itself, right now we've established that it hasn't been the greatest start, but in terms of picking the players, right? So one thing I noticed was that out of the 5 teams, only 2 of them were Sri Lankans who were picking. So Kandy had Hashan Tilakaratne, and Jaffna had Tilne Kandambi. So both these guys, I mean, they're relatively well known, and they know the players and the premier players that are in here in Sri Lanka. But the rest of it, I mean, Gaul Gladiators, it was all Pakistanis. It was the team owners and the management that was there. Yeah. Even Colombo Kings, we don't know who the owners are, but it seemed like a couple of Indians who were there who were doing the selection. Even with Dambulla, okay, we had John Lewis, Sri Lanka's former batting coach, so he might know obviously a bit more than the rest. So do you think it was a fair assessment? I mean, it was a fair sort of a thing for the players, at least, people who may have not seen them too much playing in the domestic, picking them for their teams?
No, I mean, I think each of these owners would have done their homework, right? Especially teams like Gaul, who are kind of coming in from the outside and investing in a Sri Lankan team. They would have, when you're spending that kind of money, you will get people to do that kind of homework. And Gaul Gladiators is owned by the same team as Quetta Gladiasl team. And the PSL is kind of increasingly becoming, or seems to be becoming, a league where things like data and analytics are part of their process. And I'm sure I've met the Quetta owner once last year in Pakistan, and I'm sure he would have done his background, and he seemed to have a few people advising him around that table. Wasim Akram was there as well. So I'm sure that and someone like John Lewis, I think, made quite a few good picks for Dambulla Hawks. I think he made some kind of smart value picks, and it didn't seem like anyone was out of their depth. I probably the one team that I wasn't necessarily super impressed with their draft choices was Kandy Saskars, and that was Hashan Tilakaratne's team.
Okay.
But they have Chris Gale and Kusal Pereira there as part of their kind of their 3 icon players players who were the three marquee players. So they had a good base to start off with, and they probably have some decent batsmen as well. But I thought that apart from all the kind of chaos and people not understanding how the draft works, the draft seemed to go pretty well. I think some good choices were made, and yeah, it went off well, given the circumstances.
Right. I want to speak to you about some of the players that didn't get selected, right? I mean, especially capped players, national players like Sadira Samra Vikrama, Vishwa Fernando, Dimut Karunaratne. But there were a few things said about him as well. But before that, let's try and, if you have the time, let's try and spend some time on each team. I'm starting off with Colombo Kings, coached by Dave Watmore, apparently. We don't know who the owners are yet, but Angelo Matthews is their icon player and most probably will captain it. They've got a very big name in Andre Russell. Faf du Plessis, we are still not sure about what's going to happen with him. And then Isuru Uzana, who is Sri Lanka's only player in the IPL. They've got the left arm Amilo Aponzo, Dinesh Chandimal. So decent Sri Lankan capped players in there, including big names like Andre Russell. What did you make of their picks, Andrew?
Yeah, I think if you've got kind of Angelo and Andre Russell there in the middle order, you're going to have some decent kind of finishing power, especially Isuru Udana's batting probably hasn't been at its best in the last little while, but if he can come good with the bat, you've got real firepower towards those kind of final overs. And I think they've kind of covered a few of their bases. They picked a couple of less well-known Indian players like Manvinder Bisla and Manpreet Singh Dhoni, who's played in the IPL in the past. And I think they're kind of reasonably well-rounded team. They've got a couple of, their spin bowling stocks have got Jeffrey Van der Sey and Tarinder Kaushal as kind of two of the main spinners there. So interesting, especially how Tarinder Kaushal goes, because of course he hasn't really played since he was called up. Apparently he's been working on some leg spin deliveries and some spinning off break. So this is the thing about the LPL, is that you get to see, if it happens, we'll get to see kind of the status of a lot of these players who, come in and out of the national team and have spent some time out of the national team, but we don't know kind of where they are with their cricket. And I think one of the benefits of having a tournament like this is that we'll get to figure out exactly where these players are and whether they can kind of be considered for national duty again. But Colombo's Kings, I think they've put a lot of eggs in that kind of middle order firepower basket. I'm interested to see how they'll their top order. I'm not seeing a lot of kind of high quality aggressive top order batsmen there. So I think that could be a potential weakness for them.
Well, as for the bowling, they've got the speedster Dushmantha Chamira. We know he's injury prone, so they'll have to manage him quite well. They've got the young Kalna Pereira, right? Left arm fast bowler, big lad, just finished his school cricket career 2 years ago. And they've got a couple of youngsters. Even Navod Paranavitana has been making a lot of noise in the domestic circuit after having done very well for school. So like you said, Colombo Kings do seem to be quite well rounded. I think we might be losing Andrew. Okay. All right, we've got you. Okay.
Yeah, hi.
So let's move on to Dambulla Hawks then, coached by John Lewis. You said he made some very smart picks. The icon player being Dasun Shanaka. David Miller is the overseas goal player, but seems like he might not come in. But we still got Brathwaite and Fidel Fernando, one of my favorite batsmen. They've got the pace of Kasun Rajit, Paul Sterling from Ireland. Quite excited about that. Very good batsman, and the experience of guys like Upul Taranga and Angelo Pereira. They've scored tons of runs in the domestic circuit. What do you make of them, Andrew?
Yeah, and I think they've gone the opposite way from Colombo Kings in that they've got a good top order sorted. I think if you've got Dick Weller and a Paul Sterling at the top of the order and an Fidel Fernando in that kind of top 3, top 4 positions, Upul Taranga's there as well. They've got a little bit of quality there, and then they've got Dasun Shanaka and Carlos Brathwaite to provide some firepower at the end. Where I am not convinced about them is their bowling. I think like some tell whether he's an effective T20 spinner anymore is the left arm spinner and all rounder from England. That's going to be interesting to see. And now that they've probably lost David Miller, that's some of that middle order firepower is gone as well. So yeah, I think it's their bowling that's going to be a bit of a concern. And there's that old saying, or that saying from Azhar Mahmood, that bowling is one of the most to put right in a T20 team. And I'm not seeing a lot of fantastic bowling there, but perhaps their batting can carry them.
Well, I think the only name that I can look at is Lahiru Kumara. Got serious gas in him, so hopefully he might provide them that real edge that they're looking for. There's also Lahiru Madhushankar, decent all-rounder. We forgot to mention, someone just pointed out in the Colombo team, they've got Lahiru Udara now. I've been following him since last season. He's scored a lot of runs for NCC. He's apparently worked very hard to come to where he was, so that's something good for him, at least from a player, from a personal perspective, to be able to play the LPL T20. Right now, I'm speeding this up because, again, I don't want to waste too much time looking at individual names, because I mean, this is an Insta Live. It's not like a TV program. People are using up their data to watch us. Let's move on to Gaul Gladiators, owned by Quetta Gladiators, coached by Moin Khan. Very big name in there. Two very big names in there: Lasit Malinga and Boom Boom Afridi. They've even got Bhanuka Rajapaksa. Again, if you must have seen my Instagram, I'm a big fan of him. Sarfraz Ahmad, again, very big name from Pakistan. And a lot of well-known Sri Lankan premier players. You have guys like Shehan Jayasuriya, who's been in and out of the Sri Lankan team. Mohammad Shiraz, well-known bowler. Dhananjay Lakshan, schoolboy, has been doing very well. Devindu Tilakaratne, who got selected for the Bangladesh tour before it got postponed. So, seems like a good balanced side, Andrew.
Yeah, I think they've got the big names there, and I think Afridi, has still been playing in the PSL, and I think, as far as I'm aware, had a decent tournament earlier this year before the lockdowns around the world. So I think there's and Malinga, of course, like we know that he can still, particularly at franchise level, be a top quality bowler, and be that solid death bowler at the end.
But he hasn't played for a long time, Andrew.
Sorry?
Lasit Malinga hasn't played any cricket for a long time.
He hasn't, but I think I hear that he's been doing a little bit of fitness work from the Sri Lanka coaches. So
that's
hopefully he comes back in decent shape. I think with Danushka Gunathilake and Bhanuka Rajapaksa, they've got kind of two really young, exciting batsmen top of the order. For me, this is possibly the best balanced team. And they, because they've had the money to be able to splash out on kind of, Ingram as well. Colin Ingram's a fantastic T20 player around the world. A couple of their picks, someone like Sarfraz Ahmed, not sure that that he's kind of the
I think we might be losing you, Andrew.
I think he's a decent value pick as well. Generally, this is a well balanced team. They've got most of their bases covered. Last kind of 18 months, this for me looks kind of an early favorite. The personnel they've got in there.
Right. So as you said earlier, Gaul Gladiators do seem to have done their research on who the players that they want to really pick. And, they've done quite well from what you're saying. Okay. So at least we've established that your favorites are Gaul Gladiators. I don't have to ask you that question again. Let's move on to Jaffna Stallions. Then we think they'll be coached by Tilna Kandambi, former Bloomfield cricketer. I think played for Sri Lanka a couple of times. Very good batsman, known for his, strategic thinking and leadership abilities. Can you hear me, Andrew? I seem to be losing you. Yeah, okay. So, marquee player, we've got Tissera Pereira, David Malan, as we said, might drop out towards the end. But one of the key players, I think, for me is Wanindu Hasaranga. That boy has been doing a lot of good things for Sri Lanka. A few months ago that we played, he has been making a lot of noise with ball and bat both. Shoaib Malik brings in a lot of experience. Usman Chinwari, good left-arm pace. Avishka Fernando, opening batter for Sri Lanka, scored a wonderful 100 in the World Cup, announced himself, so people really know who he is. And in general, I think they too have gone with some very smart picks. They've gone for some experienced domestic players. Even Dhananjay De Silva is, they're not sure about his T20 abilities. But I think what really this tournament might do for some of these players who, who are more used to the more premier conditions, I think what this tournament will do is really help them upskill themselves and, play in situations that they may not have played before alongside these international cricketers. Can you hear me, Andrew? Okay, let's try and get Andrew again. Myself, I'm really used to speaking to a camera that's in a studio. These Insta Live things are very new for me as well. Hi, Andrew, you're back.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. I lost you. I couldn't hear you for a while.
Okay, all right. So I think one of our data is not doing that well. But either way, I think I was just going through Jafna Stallion's picks, guys like Hasaranga, Shoaib Malik, vastly experienced. We've got Binura Fernando, young bloke. Suranga Lakmal, very experienced fast bowler. So they too seem to have made some good picks. Tilna Kandambi, he knows some of these players very well. What's your take on that team, Andrew?
Yeah, I think Jaffna actually clearly they don't have the bankroll that some of the other teams do. And you could see that from, their marquee picks. Two of their marquee picks were Sri Lankan players, flash on players like... but I think Tilana Kandambi used his very, very highly rated local domestic captain for years. I mean, a lot of players who played under him, who want to play for Sri Lanka, have kind of rated him very, very highly as kind of a developer of talent and kind of captains the team really well. And it's really nice to see him get this chance to coach an LPL team. I think given he had some kind of pretty slim resources, he was probably the best in the draft for me. He made the best out of. What I mean by that is the team that he leads is not necessarily the best squad, but he made the best value picks. He picked players like one in this Hasaranga in those kind of key marquee positions, and then others like Minod Bhanuka, Chaturanga De Silva, someone we haven't seen in a while. Dhananjay De Silva, he picked some players match-winning, kind of bringing fans, give you a lot of all-round value who aren't just there to battle bowl. They are also excellent fielders. Binura Fernando, I'm interested to see how he goes. Played a couple of T20s for Sri Lanka, but kind of his career's kind of gone on a little bit since then. But otherwise, this is I think a pretty well-balanced team. They'll have to now work out what they're going to do in the absence of David Milan. That'll leave a pretty big hole in their top order, and they'll need to find someone to fill it. That's going to be a challenge for them, I think. But if they can get through that, they're kind of a dark horse team. It's one of those teams you can see kind of really gelling through the course of a tournament and kind of making a good run towards the back end of a tournament, because it's just full of the kinds of players that add value that doesn't always get reflected in on the scoreboard or in stats. Who made good saves around the field, who fell fully into a cricket game. And I think I'm also looking forward to seeing how Charit Sri Lanka goes as well. Someone who captained Sri Lanka under-19 in domestic cricket yet. So there's a few players. So perhaps one or two of them will get a chance to play.
Right. Okay. So as we've said about all the rest of the teams, Jafna Stallions do seem quite balanced as well. And as you said, they've picked a few youngsters who might just surprise us. Not very big names in there. A last question on them, though, Andrew. Do you think Tissera Pereira will captain the team, and is he good captaincy material?
I mean,
I'm losing you, Andrew. Can you repeat yourself, please?
I think Thisara had a half decent captaincy stint, earlier on. Captains. There was one series, although Sri Lanka lost 2 or 3 of those games, he seemed to be something about his captaincy that the team responded to do a decent job. Perhaps Shoaib Malik is another option for captaincy that they'll look at. Someone again who has international stan, did that for I think 1 or 2 years. So they might go in that direction, but it'll be interesting to see how they manage all of these young players. How they'll bring everybody together. I think leadership. Out of a collection of kind of promising all-round players, and how they're led, how good their strategies are, is going to determine how well they do.
Okay, Andrew, I seem to have lost you for most of what you said there. I just kept, the buffering, the whole circle kept coming. But I hope our listeners were able to hear your thoughts. So I think that should be good enough. Can you hear me clearly, though?
Yeah, I've got you clearly. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, so let's move on to the last team then, Candy Tuskers, the team that you said you don't fancy too much because apparently, other than the few icon players that are there, like Kusal Pereira, Chris Gale, Kusal Mendes, you don't see that the team has the potential to be able to really do that well. But they've got a lot of experience in there. I'm looking at names like Dilruwan Pereira, Sikuke Prasanna has played around T20 leagues around the world. Asele Gunaratne, plays for the army, has loads of experience. They've got a youngster in Ambuldenia, left arm off spinner. Ishan Jayaratne, again, very experienced fast bowler, and ambidextrous Kamindu Mendes as well. So at least when I saw the teams first, I don't know if it's my bias towards KJP and Kusal Mendes, because they are among my top favorite Sri Lankan cricketers. I thought that Candy Tuskers might be a very good batting team.
They are, I think. They've got no in there. I think you're right. They're on the most of their bases covered. My worry is what's going to happen to them come the death bowling. They've got Wahab Riaz and Nuwan Pradeep who could possibly take them. Pradeep can be a very, very, very solid death bowler at times. But again, we haven't seen him for a while. The injury issues, you're always worried about that with him. Perform that role. Occasionally he can have those bursts. And Liam Plunkett, the other fast bowler, the other kind of big name fast bowler that's there, generally is someone who operates through the middle overs rather than at the depth. So that's where I kind of worry about for them. They have some half decent spin options, but no one who you're kind of banking on for 4 overs every single game. Dilruwan Pereira, much more suited to the longer formats than the T20 formats. Sikuke Prasanna has played a few, you're right, he has played a few T20 leagues around the world, but his leg spin is not always reliable. And Ambuldenia, again, someone more suited to the longer formats. So that is where I kind of, and Kamindu Mendes, although his bowling gets a lot of coverage because it's so unusual. He bowls with both arms. Really, it's his batting that he gets picked in teams for. He's a better batsman than he's a bowler. So that's the bowling front is where I kind of think they've got a few holes. And if someone like a Wahab Riaz or a Liam Plunkett or a Nuwan Pradeep, they gel well together and they end up having a really, really good tournament as a unit, be solved. But right now, I think there are too many uncertainties with that attack.
Okay, all right. So that's your take on the Candy Tuskers. Okay, very quick question before we move on to the unpicked players, which is something that really everyone wants to know about. On paper, do you still say that Galle Gladiators seem to be the strongest team that has been picked so far?
I didn't catch catch.
Yeah, so I was saying before we move on to the players that have been unpicked, and that's something that everybody wants to know about, how the whole draft system worked in the beginning. But before I move on to that, let's finish with the teams. I want to know, on paper, at least to you, do you still say that Gol Gladiators seem to be the most likely and the most favorites to be able to win a tournament like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think they just got, picks like Colin Ingram, Muhammad Amir, who can execute plans. So long as they've got someone, and they also, I'm also thinking about their kind of background as a PSL team and having done, franchise cricket before in another very, very high quality franchise tournament. And that suggests that they've got like a back room and the backroom knowledge to know what it takes to kind of make a successful team. Kedah Gladiators haven't been an especially successful PSL team, but they have been in that environment where, they're using data analytics, they're using, they kind of have well-defined roles about, what the coach's job is, what the analyst's jobs are, and they've been through this process before with other teams. So that's why I think they probably have, and I'm looking through that list, and I don't think that there are too many weaknesses. Perhaps spin bowling. Perhaps they could. They've got Akila Dhananjaya and Milind Siriwardana there, and Lakshan Sandakan. Perhaps they could have had,